Ready to start? Hi guys, welcome to another great morning at Dreamhouse. Thank you for coming. Hopefully you had a good night last night at the Dreamfest. So basically just going to take you through today is Lightning Components, just a quick introduction. My name is Andrew Patton, I'm an SE in the platform team from the UK. This is Jan van der Broek from our Belgium team.
Good morning.
And yeah, so just going to go through a quick introduction to Lightning Components. I spent a lot of time on the booths yesterday talking to people and kind of probably felt I might need to change some of the slides, but we'll go with it anyway. But what we're going to go through today, obviously forward-looking statement, you've all seen this lots of times this week. So we're going to go through what's Lightning, what are Lightning Components, how Lightning Components are made up, show you some examples, and then Jan will actually do a demonstration of building the component. So, as I said yesterday, I've got to feel that a lot of people haven't actually tried doing Lightning Components yet. It seems a bit scary or something. Trailhead is the best place to go to learn this stuff. So, as we keep throughout everywhere today is all about trailheads. But if you want to learn something about Salesforce, that is the best place to go. Okay. So, what is Lightning? It's a lot of things. It's some product features, and as we saw with Mark's keynote, it's actually been rebranded, so these slides are now out of date. So there is now a thing called My Lightning, which a lot of people were interested in about yesterday. But basically, so Lightning is kind of the product features, the app builder, process builder, Lightning experience, which have all now been badged under My Lightning. Then there's the kind of the developer side, which is the component framework, which is what we're talking about today. And then the Lightning design system. So that's the core UI framework that's used that you can actually use yourself inside Visualforce or your own web apps. So if you wanted to build that consistency across your applications with Salesforce, you could use that elsewhere. And then there's some marketing and branding. So there's Lightning Service, Sales Cloud Lightning, whatever. And the key one, I'd put a My Lightning thing on here if I could find an image of it. We don't actually have any images. They're just on the banners around, okay? So for today and for your focus as a developer, it's about basically that kind of combination of Lightning experience being made up of the component framework, the styling, and then building applications with that. So that's really where our focus area is. Okay, so what are they? Out of quick hands up, just to get some interaction and wake people up. So who's on Classic at the moment? Okay, and who's on Lightning or looking at using Lightning? Okay, so there's a few people. That's good. Oh, it must be me. This is apparently they fixed this on Monday, and it's just good. Yeah. Okay. Cool. Yeah. So no, it's not. Listen. Do you want to just maybe? He's disappeared. Yeah, so the adoption of Lightning, that's kind of, it's more of a business challenge than a technical challenge, I think, when you talk to people. It's actually about either the functionality is not quite right or there's stuff that was in Classic that's no longer supported. I think most people would move to it if obviously those business challenges were there. But Lightning components, so what are they? There's basically about, and we'll show you some screenshots, it's about having these reusable components on the screen which can talk to each other, which kind of break down functionality discreetly. Something which kind of, with Visualforce, it tends to be this big long page of stuff. You've got this big block of code. It's all doing kind of one thing, and each time you do something, it reloads the page. And you can get around that with some JavaScript and some quite clever programming. But really, Lightning Components moves you away from having to worry about that stuff and adopting what's a kind of more of a standard JavaScript framework. So having that, I've got something on a page, something happens, I want to just reload this one bit rather than reloading the page. So what will happen is for your users, things will actually get quicker because they're doing things in the UI, they're popping up windows, they're filling in things, they're closing them, and the UI is not having to reload. It's not having to go all the way back to the server and retrieve everything. It's just updating what needs to update. It is, however, a move away from that kind of point-and-click Salesforce developer approach to more of a full code approach. So now you kind of need to know a bit more about JavaScript programming. But again, Trailhead covers all that in quite good detail. So you'll be able to go there and understand it. And for myself, when I first started looking at Lightning components, I did find them it was a bit hard to follow. It's a bit hard to understand. The Trailheads are much better now. The documentation's a lot better. And some of the issues that were there early on are fixed. So I think if you looked at Lightning components a year ago and found it maybe not for you, it's worth going back now and looking, because with the releases and the updates, there's been some big changes. Okay, and then it obviously supports the latest browser development. So it's HTML5, it's CSS3, it supports touch events, and so on. So suddenly you've been able to do those things that make a more kind of, for your users, a more modern kind of interaction. And then these components, there's out-of-the-box standard components. So with the Salesforce, Sales Cloud, Service Cloud, they're built using Lightning components. The features and functions there you can reuse in building your own custom apps or modifying your own Sales Cloud or Service Cloud. You can create your own, which is what Jan will show you today, or you can download them from the App Exchange. So App Exchange is quite good. It's got, there's some good ones there around like carousels for scrolling images and so on. So you don't have to go and write them yourself. You can compose apps from App Exchange. Okay, so going back to why should we use Lightning or Visualforce? Really, Lightning components are good for just customizing that out of the box. Obviously, if you're on Classic, then there's not much you can do there. But if you're on Lightning and you want to modify the UI, you want to change things, which is what a lot of people have been doing with their kind of Classic version, modifying the Visualforce, then Lightning Components is great for that, because you can build a little map component which you can then drag into different pages. You don't have to do it on every, you don't have to kind of write it 6 or 7 times to support different objects. You can write a generic version, drop it in, and it will work. There's now a utility bar that sits down the bottom in Lightning, and so you can build little mini apps that pop up. So if you've got something which is common across a lot of applications, then you actually can just have this kind of little app that pops up, captures some information, creates some records, maybe runs a flow, and you can put that down there, or you can put it under a quick action. So some of the things like the JavaScript buttons, which is one of the things you've done in the past with Visualforce, to have a button which kind of navigates through things, you can now do that with Lightning components. You can put that under a quick action, pop up a component, and do the same stuff there. We would say carry on using Visualforce. If you do want to carry on doing that but want to start moving users across, then we now support the ability to use the design system, the Salesforce Lightning design system inside Visualforce. There's a tag you can turn on, and then at least you can start moving those components quite easily across to looking like Lightning. And realistically, it's a kind of a Lightning-first approach, and then that gradual migration of your old code. So find a group of users that kind of makes sense to kind of move them across, start building some components for them, and then migrate the existing code over time. Because don't try and do that 2-year implementation, rewrite, and so on. Because you'd just be there forever, and by the time you get to the end of it, you wouldn't have gained much. Okay, so what's a Lightning component? So it's not as complicated as it first looks. It's very, very similar to Visualforce. So Visualforce had a view and the Apex controller. And what we've really done is we've introduced kind of this controller in the middle that's a JavaScript controller to where you can actually kind of do some interaction. So it kind of gives you this extra level which saves you going back to the server. You can make put some business logic there, make some decisions, and then call through to Apex. So really it's just this extra thing in the middle which gives you the ability to kind of reload that particular part of the page, control that, call off to Apex, get the data back, and then update the component you've got. So we'll see that in the demo in a minute, and it'll maybe make a bit more sense. And components can contain other components. So you don't have to have just kind of these big components that you build up. Ideally, your components will be broken down into a lot of reusable components. You can include them in each other, and that's going to help you just kind of build up this asset of components, but it's going to be easier to maintain. So if you want to update a particular rendering of a view list, for example, if you've built your own custom view list, then you can just update that one component that outputs the row without having to worry about breaking everything in the container. So the main kind of page you built, that will be, you can change stuff without breaking things. So it's a lot easier. Okay, so what do we mean by components? So this is an example of the Lightning app builder. What we've got here is we've got 3 separate components. So there's the standard components off the left-hand side. So we've got the cases view. So it's just drag the list view in. And you can see there you can configure it. You can choose the object, and you can choose the filter. And then we drag 2 report views in. So what you're starting to see is there's just this ability to compose a UI of several different things. And that's what's called an app page. So that's just a standalone page. And the great thing is with Lightning is if you build that page, that would actually render down on the Salesforce mobile app. So whatever you build here will work seamlessly down there. And it will actually re-render. So whereas in Visualforce you would have had to write code to try and manage that, with the responsive design of Lightning, the page will just flow. So what it will do is it put the billing cases at the top and then those 2 reports underneath, and it will manage that for you. So slightly more complex example is the Dreamhouse demo app. So the URL's there. This is a really good way of learning Lightning and learning some of the stuff in Salesforce. So it's got things like how to do the IoT, it's got how to build pages, how to use Process Builder, and it basically, you can see the code for everything that's in this. So what we're looking at here is the properties page. But what we do is just jump, if Jan jumps into the actual working demo, then we'll show you some of that in action. So what we're looking at here is what's the Property Explorer page. So this is where we built what we called an app page, and then we've got some components. So Jan's just scrolling through a kind of scroller component, and as you see underneath, the property list is changing. It's filtering that. So that's just 2 separate components that talk to each other. And as you saw, when he clicks on the Seaport District Retreat, over on the right-hand side, those components are updating. So you can just click on Heart of Harvard as well. Just click on another one. Thanks. And then you click through to that. But you see there, there was events being used. So when you click on that, it fires an event saying, hey, someone selected this property, and then those other components are listening. And then the good thing here is we're actually on the detail page, so we're into a record detail page. We're actually reusing 2 of those components on the right-hand side. So they're able to be reused in different contexts. One was where it was listening to events, and then the other one is where it's going, hey, I'm on a record page, I've got the record ID, I'll load, go and get the data and show the map. So they're reusable in different places, and they're able to communicate. Okay.
All right. Whoops, one moment.
Cool, we should have rehearsed that. Okay, cool, so events. So what we saw there was the eventing model. So that's one of the other important things with Lightning components, and this is one of the powerful things. That ability to build up a page that's made of lots of different things, which just kind of then talk to each other. So when you click on a master record, all the side ones update. That having those loosely coupled components means that you're able to build these UIs faster, and you're able to not worry about having to kind of contain everything in one page. And it works through the eventing model is basically a fire and forget. So you say, okay, I'm going to fire this event. I don't really care if anyone else is listening. If they are, they'll update and render the UI, but you don't have to worry about that. So it's not like if you build a component, you have to know what other 6 components maybe listen to that event. It's basically fire and forget. You build them, and then if someone's put that on the UI, it will update. And there's standard events out of the box, and then you can build your own custom events. So in that demo we saw there, when we select the property, it fires an event saying this record's been selected, and then those other components listen. Okay, cool. So what Jan will do now is he'll actually take you through a demo of building the component, building a Lightning component, show you how that works, drags it onto a page.
Excellent, thank you.
Cheers.
So I know, like the day after Dreamfest, we're not going to make it that complicated. So we're going to use a very simple scenario, very simple component, where in our use case, Maya is the service desk manager, and she has a bit of a problem. There's like too many cases open at the same time. Her team's not focused. They're having to do way too much work in parallel. So she wants to narrow the number of open cases. Step number 1, to achieve that, give everybody visibility and how many open cases do we currently have. That can be done with like a wave report or some reports and dashboards, or she can create a Lightning component and drop that on the pages where she thinks it's relevant, such as the home page, record pages, communities, can be anywhere, right in the console, so that there's always a view of how are we doing. So in a few minutes, we're going to build that out. And oops. So this is a live thing, so it's always a bit more exciting. So here we are in our developer console, which is like the IDE that's part of Salesforce, and where we can, instead of having to type it in a text pad and uploading it, we at least get some developer help. So we'll start with creating an Apex class that's doing the query on the server. And so what we need, and I'll cheat a bit by copy pasting. So we just create a simple method. and we create a method that gets you an integer of the cases count that's currently open. And all that does is we execute a query where the status is not closed, which means open cases. Now, this is an Apex class, but to enable that to be called directly from a Lightning component, all we need to do is annotate that with Aura enabled. Once it's there, then we can use that this Apex class as a controller and talk to it from our JavaScript controller. So this is doing all the heavy lifting on the server side. So that's saved. Let's now start building up our component that's running on the client side. Oops. So when you create a new component, this is what you get. You get basically some empty tags. This is one part of the component. You have the component itself, which is the view. You also have the controller, and you have a bunch of other subcategories. For example, if you want to do custom styling beyond what is included in the Lightning design system. And you can create even documentation when you want to distribute something, so that documentation is included right in the component itself. So let's start expanding our Lightning component. And so now, in the tag, we added two interfaces. Just saying, OK, we're going to implement available for all page types, which means we can drop it anywhere. We can drop it on the home page, we can drop it on record pages, we can drop it in communities. This just enables it for everything. You can narrow it down if you want, but here we'll say Maya can drop it everywhere. Secondly, we're linking the controller. In the second part, we're saying to this Lightning component, hey, this Apex class is talking to that. This Lightning component is talking to this Apex class that we've just created. So that's the absolute basics. Secondly, we'll need a variable to store the number of that we want to display. So here we have number of records of type integer. That's what we call an attribute. Then next, we'll show actually something on the screen. But I could type some HTML here to display what I want to show. Or I can leverage the inheritance, the reusability that Andrew mentioned before. There's a bunch of base Lightning components already included, such as Lightning cards, where I can just specify the title and what I want to be have as part of the body, and we're there. We don't need to go and code like 20 lines of HTML. And Lightning-based components will take care of that for us. So here we also have our variable, which is automatically triggered, automatically linked with the number of records here. So when this variable updates, the Lightning component will re-render and show that on the screen. Now, there's two more things that we need to do. First of all is we need to call our JavaScript controller that runs in the browser. So what we'll say here is we add a handler for when the component starts. We're going to execute a JavaScript action. Just do initialization. We're going to do that in the controller. But we still need our controller. So that's what we'll do here. And let me quickly save this. So now in the JavaScript controller, we have our doInit function already. And now we have what we link it with our Apex controller, and we're going to say this is an action and trigger that remote action asynchronously on the Apex side. We're set the callback because it's asynchronous. It's not waiting for the request response. It's just saying, OK, whenever you're done, whenever there is a callback, execute this code. And that just basically sets the variable. And then we'll just fire and forget about that action. And when the Apex controller returns, we'll update the variable. So in maybe 15 lines, we're done with our component. Let's now drop it on our page. So when we go here to edit page, edit our home page, we have our case viewer. We drop that right on top. And we now have a quick component that says the number of open cases, which is what we've built just now. And so you'll see it's 0, then the component returns, the Apex controller returns, updates with 38 open cases that we have in the system. So in 5 minutes, we can build something that's useful for Maya. You can go nuts with this and make way more complex systems of components. So that's the end of our demo. Let's just quickly set you on our way to the next step, so you can start doing this yourself. This is the very basics, but there are great trails on Trailhead, Introduction to Lightning Components, how to start with step-by-step explanation of all the code that's there. If you want even more information than what's on Trailhead, we have our cheat sheets, which is like a 1 or 2 page summary of what we have, what you can do, some tips and tricks. Or if you want to know everything there is to know about Lightning Components, take a look at the developer guide. If you can't find your answer in there, it's like, I would be amazed. So thanks a lot. And if you have additional questions, catch us after the talk. Thank you.